figured you guys have been talked to for 3 days straight. I've been talking for 3 days straight. And so instead of presenting a presentation, a lot of what I talk about is very complex. And so a lot of people have lots of questions. And so I wanted this time to be an opportunity to answer whatever questions you have about all of these kind of complex and semi-controversial topics that I always like to bring to the table. So, with that said, would anyone like to ask anything? Yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest limitation as far as the laboratory side, as far as like detecting cannabinoids, terpenes, anything like that, so we can measure better, study better?
Sure.
Do you think those restrictions are on the lab side, the regulatory side, the market side?
That's a
What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. The question was, what can we do to improve the laboratory testing for cannabinoids and terpenes and make the tests a little bit more full and whole? So I've got two things to say to that. To answer your question, it's as easy as having the software that the HPLC and GC machines use to detect what they're detecting. So this software is pre-programmed for a set library of cannabinoids or terpenes. It knows what they are and how to find them and how to mark them, right? And what my belief is all of the labs that look for terpenes and cannabinoids have some kind of software that they're using, and it has a library, and the library is this big, and what it could be is this big. And so I believe if laboratories had software that knew how to detect the 113 cannabinoids that the plants could produce up to, and each flower has over 200 terpenes on it, but it's not that cannabis has only 200 terpene types. There's 20,000 individually registered organic terpenes in the world. And so how big is the software for all the terpenes we could be looking for? The thing is we know what all the terpenes are. We're just not looking for them. And so so that's to answer your question. But I guess for me to just do my own spiel, knowing the cannabinoids and the terpenes is not something that customers or patients know or understand or look for generally. How much does that matter? So every lab test that you have on your product is meaningless to the consumer. I believe it appeases soccer moms, right? Like, you have the legislature who's freaked out that you're selling drugs, and you want to make sure that you're doing it safe. So we're going to make laboratories that are going to test the product. People know that that's happening, and it makes them feel good. The reality is there's not one lab that looks for quality. The value of terpenes and cannabinoids is not qualitative. That's a stoner idea. Stoners think the more THC you have, the better the product is. That's funny because it's very stonerish. Because that doesn't mean that you're not smoking flower full of spider mites and their exoskeletons and fecal matter, and it comes from a dispensary that thinks they understand proper flushing, but 80% of people I talk to that believe they know what flushing means, they don't know what flushing actually is. So you go buy product in dispensaries and your flower's unflushed. It's got bugs in it. It passed lab testing. So to me, I produced a standard operating procedure for what cannabis quality is and means, and how do you look for it, and how do you do that consistently and objectively each time. That's the tag program that I built. And I use it for cannabis cups, and it's totally cool. So my process is a standard process that we made in-house that I would love some smart professional people to help us make even into a more legitimate process. Our process is really quality specific, and it's not what the labs are testing for. So what my product would be my standard operating procedure and our weed grading calculator software that we built. We would license to any laboratory that's currently testing flower. So get your cannabinoids, get your terpenes, know your pesticides, and then include a qualitative report with it. There's only one extra thing that's missing. When you smoke for weed, what's it going to do to you? Lab reports don't tell you that. Interpening methodology does. An interpening methodology is something very complex that a lot of people have a very hard time grasping, believing, and I believe that because it sounds crazy. It sounds totally crazy that I can actually teach people how to see and smell the psychotropic effect of flower. But I've been doing it for 10 years around the world. 90% of the people who take my level 1 and level 2 class fly in from out of state and out of country for it. It's something no one else teaches. And that's what I'm here to answer more questions about. If you guys have questions, I'm going to grab this little cup of water real quick because I'm super thirsty. And then I was thinking about going live. You guys know about this thing called social media? I would love to answer more questions about interpening and its methodology and how we teach people how to smell the effects of a flower.
Max,
Yeah.
explain the different segments of your nose where the scent hits and lingers, because that really works, and I've used that.
Corey, would you come here? Okay, I'll do that. And I'll use slides to show you what we're talking about. Could you be my audience? It's so cool that you can be 200 different people live. My computer is totally, this is totally good.
It's actually better if you stay there, they can move back.
Okay, so to get started talking about this, here's the deal. We know that the cannabis plant produces the spectrum of terpenes. These terpenes, can you detect them on your own without a machine? Yes, you can smell them. Can you smell the difference between the terpenes being very stinky versus barely being able to smell them? Yes. That's the degree of pungency. Okay? So 1 + 1 = 2. If you have weed that is extremely pungent, you have a ton of terpenes there. That's common sense. So check this out. You have Blue Dream in this hand, and you have Bubba Kush in this hand. Your Blue Dream was tested at 25% THC. And your Bubba Kush was tested at 10% THC. People think that the flower that has more than double THC in it will get you twice as high or twice as medicated. If the flower that has 25% THC, this Blue Dream, has been sitting in a safe for 6 months, waiting to be put on the shelf, it most likely has no terpenes in it. Terpenes you should think about as a beer bubble. When you pour your beer and there's that tiny little bubble stuck to the side of the glass and it's wafting a living chain, that's power. This gas has a power. And the totality of the head of the beer is the bouquet of the cannabis. that's its terpene fingerprint. Each of those individual terpenes making a collective smell. You can see how thick that foam is because of how many bubbles are pouring into it. It's fresh, it's alive. What happens to your beer bubbles hour by hour? The gas runs out of steam, it's not infinite. So what happens to your glass of beer the next day? It's gone flat. Most of the cannabis goes flat because the terpenes that are escaping every single second that after that plant's been cut down, your terpenes are escaping. Now, really good growers have really good cure methods. There are cure methods that allow the trichomes to not dry out. The second your fatty lipid sticky trichomes dry out and they're dry, the shell cracks and all of those terpenes disappear. So if you fully dry your cannabis out before the cure, you might have killed your flower before you even started curing it. There are growers out there who have flower that's really good 6 months post-cure. That's rare. What's common is large jars of cannabis with tons of oxygen space in them, allowing the flower to dehydrate, allowing the trichomes to oxidize, allowing the terpenes to disappear, killing your polypharmacy. Now you're just having weed with THC in it. So let's get back to the Blue Dream with 25% THC that's 6 months old. You can barely smell the weed. When you smell it in the jar, like you can smell it, but it's like, you really have to smell hard to smell it. The Bubba Kush that only has 10% THC in it, when you smell it, it almost hurts. It's like, oof. It smells like a skunk. It smells like a pachyderm. It smells like diesel gas. Soaking in myrcene and terpenoline. That's an OG combination. You can smell the terpenoline here on the ophthalmic part of your trigeminal nerve and the myrcene way down here. I can smell and feel the sedative chemistry is also got stimulating chemistry, like a lot of OG varietals do. You can feel the terpenoline here and the myrcene here and know that OG varietals are heavy because they give you as much of a stoned as they do a high simultaneously. That's why that herb's intense and why a lot of stoners look for it. But you can also smell on the ophthalmic part of the trigeminal nerve. You can feel out of the spectrum of 200 terpenes that you have, are they more stimulating or are they more sedative terpenes? If the combination of the 200 terpenes are present, and it just so happens that the majority of them are more stimulating terpenes than sedative, you'll not only smell the type of terpenes that are there with your first cranial nerve, your ophthalmic bulb, you'll feel those stimulating terpenes collectively up here. And if you haven't tried this, it's really awesome.
It really works too.
It blows people's minds. Usually, like before I even knew about the trigeminal nerve, I would go into ENT's offices and ask nose doctors, how do I smell in different parts of my face? And they say, well, you can't. I say, okay, well, smell this jar of weed and smell this jar of weed. This jar you smell here, and this jar you smell way up here. And nose scientists are blown away. It also works with tea. Any herbs we've discovered. This was something I just observed as a teenager who was getting myself off of pharmaceuticals and onto cannabis. I was smelling which ones helped me with my ADD. I stopped taking Adderall and Ritalin because I can see and smell the stimulating varietal that helps me pay attention in class. And when my brain needs to cool down, I learned how to see and smell the herbs that sedate me and which direction I need to go. And now with legal cannabis, there's so much herb to play with, I can show people the spectrum. My level 2 students, to be certified, you've got 20 jars of cannabis and they're all random and unlabeled. You have to put them in order from stimulating to sedative using only your human senses. And that's why we call it a cannabis sommelier, right? It's because my cannabis sommeliers can smell flower and see, oh, your pistils are more yellow and orange, are more yellow and white than they are orange. That's a narrow leaf type that you harvested 3 weeks too early because all of your broadleaf marijuana types were finished. And you have 2 different varietals, chemovars, in the same room. Every grow in Colorado pulls all their chemovars down to 8 weeks. And your narrow leaf marijuana types have an extra 1, 2, 3, or 4 more weeks of flowering to go. So the weed exists, it looks good, it smells good. If you smoke it, you will get high. It's just a green banana. If you let that fruit ripen on the vine an extra 2 weeks as it needs to, you'd be smoking a yellow banana. Your polypharmacy would increase because you would allow the plant to photosynthesize and grow its chemistry. I can train people to just see that in flower. So, getting back to your Bubba Kush, your Blue Dream. If your Bubba Kush stinks so hard that it punches you in the face, and you smoke that versus smoking your 25% THC flower that has no terpenes in it, I'm telling you, as someone who has been in charge of judging 8 professional cannabis cups 10 cups now in 2 different countries in 4 different states. My job is to consume and process trash bags worth of samples that we do with our computer program that we're analyzing everything using our standard operating procedure. And this includes having to consume products such as isolates. When you smoke isolated THC on its own, the effect is like this. When you smoke flower with 20% THC, but soaking in fresh terpenes, the effect is like this. And when people learn that, their smoking habits change. I'm really proud of how many people I have gotten off dabbing. Most people don't know that dabbing is freebasing. And when you can freebase away your CB1s and CB2s, which not only affects the entirety of your endocannabinoid system and your health, but it makes your weed smoking suck. Like if you like the effects of the euphoria, if you like those subtle little flares of beautiful feelings that you get from this awesome plant, say bye-bye if you start dabbing. Those effects go away. I don't understand why you would want to soak your cerebral cortex in wax, paraffin and cumin, with 10 times the concentrate of pesticides and fungicides in it. And legally, in this state, up to 5,000 parts per million of a flammable gas called butane that retains heavy metals and polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which have been proven to be cancerous. You do that to get high? Shit, dude, you can just smoke a bowl. In fact, smoking a bowl will get you, like, here's the fun part. I love asking this to dabbers. I'm like, all right, so you freebase, dab, 90% THC, right? That's a lot of THC. You're doing that to get really high. Have you ever noticed how weird it is that your high only lasts 15 minutes? And when you smoke a bowl of 20% THC flower, your high can last for 45 minutes to an hour, depending on your tolerance. You ever notice that? You ever notice that you could get high, so much higher, in a certain direction for a longer period of time because your brain is absorbing a decent amount of chemistry that it can process. When you overload your brain, it's trying to save itself by turning the receptors off because it's an overdose, which is why it's mowing them down, which is why it's increasing your tolerance exponentially, which is why you have to continue dabbing, which is why flower doesn't work anymore. So if you like getting high, stop freebasing fucking waxes in your brain. Smoke some flower. people don't tell people this. No one in the industry says this stuff. So if we're legislatively mandated to lab test cannabis, we're not looking for its quality. We're just looking for its chemistry. How much of its chemistry are we looking for? A fraction of it. We are looking for a fraction of that chemistry. And we are telling people that this is the potency of these products. It's not. Yeah.
I would just say on the potency issue, I think it's because the industry has adopted potency to be equal to concentration.
Yeah.
That's how potency is understood. It's you're correct, it's not accurate
Yeah.
terminology. But
Like to me, what potency is how much chemistry that's available at the time, how much of that is getting through the blood-brain barrier when you consume it. That's an equation. How much of the collectiveness of chemistry are we working with, and how much of that is getting in our brain? Knowing what one of the molecules out of the 320 that are psychoactive on this plant is not, and just knowing how much exists in the plant of it, not how much of that's bioavailable, is not an equation of potency. It's just not.
Right.
We're just lab testing for THC to make soccer moms happy. It just appeases the legislature. They just know we're lab testing our stuff to make sure it's safe. They don't understand what we're doing. We don't understand what we're doing. Nobody understands what we're doing. I hate to be the one to break it to you, but that's what I believe is the truth. Yes?
So when it comes to vaping, what's your opinion on that? You don't like that?
So vaping and dabbing are two different things. What's really interesting is the action of dabbing, freebasing, is chemically and technically a vapor because there's no plant material that's being combusted. So there's no tar. I love when people try to say why dabbing is like good because it's vaping. It's like, man, it's healthier for you. It's vaping. It's not smoking. It's like, you're right. It's vaping. But oh my God, it might be the most dangerous thing you ever did to yourself. And it for sure takes away your cannabis experience. That's a fact. No dabber can argue that. I've been one. I can tell you honestly myself. Okay. But vaporizing, as you know, is healthier than smoking. And vaping is great, especially when it's convenient and portable. The question is what are we vaping? So imagine you're in the drug dealing business to make money. Imagine that. And you produce grams of vapor, something for people to vape on. What if you thought to yourself, if 50% of this gram is MCT oil, or 50% of it is PEG, polyethylene glycol, then if I sell a $40 gram of THC oil, $20 is paying for something that costs a fraction of a penny, which is completely unnecessary in a vape pen. You don't need PEG. You don't need MCT. In fact, if you were a producer that extracted cannabis terpenes, and that's what you used as a oil to make your oil more viscous, to hit your atomizer, I'd be buying that all day long. Because you've removed the smoking element of the plant, but you're getting the polypharmacy of terpenes and cannabinoids in a vapor, which is healthier than smoke, with no need for MCT oil, no need for polyethylene glycol. And when I judge cannabis cups, very rarely I get the opportunity to smoke someone's product that is pure cannabis plant terpenes in hash oil. Boom! I can't turn my brain off. It's one of my things I suffer from. I have to become intoxicated to sleep. It is very frustrating when you're on the road and you can't bring your flower with you everywhere. have a pen that is strong enough to do its job because it's full of the real stuff, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Tastes good, smokes good, feels good, healthier for you than smoking. Vaping is great. Just know what you're vaping. Yes,
What is the product of which you speak? Is there,
it's a hash oil.
is there a company that you trust that makes it? Do you make your own?
So you know what's funny is
Where do you?
I don't shop in dispensaries because at Judge Cannabis Cups, people bring me trash bags worth of product. I have more than enough to do it. And I grow the best flower on earth. Which grower won't tell you that? Right? So I'm not really cognizant of who's producing what. I'm not a brand kind of a guy.
Pyramid CO2 extracts and use terpenes only.
Is that in Colorado?
Yeah.
Who is it?
What's it called?
Pyramid.
See, that's something I need to know. Because I would go buy that. Because that's something because that's a cool product, right?
Say it again, please. What is the pyramid?
Pyramid.
Yeah, but how is it processed, please?
It's supercritical CO2, and they just use terpenes as their cutting agent. It's actually becoming much more common.
That's great. Yeah, and so in our industry is always in a constant state of evolution, and it seems to be getting better and better. Hopefully because of instances like this, where you get someone like me, who's, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm complaining about a truth in our industry, which is there's a lot of product out there I don't think is good.
Right.
And if there's a product producer sitting in here that's listening to that, this is where change happens. It's a conversation, we're just communicating with each other. And it's so great that our industry is using less MCT oil and using less polyethylene glycol. Yes?
What about ingesting a full spectrum one?
I'm a doctor in the house would probably answer that question better than me. We're talking about activating the ECS with all of the polypharmacy available if we're talking about a full spectrum. Here's a fun one for me. 9.5 out of 10 full spectrum producers, I don't care what they're producing. It's a tincture, it's a rub, it's an oil, it's a pill, and it's full spectrum. So to me, I think to myself, out of the cannabis plant's potential spectrum, which is 113 cannabinoids, 200 terpenes, and 20 flavonoids, that's 320 chemicals in a raw state. To me, that's the spectrum that cannabis has. So if you're telling me that you have a product and you extracted it from a cannabis plant and it's a full spectrum, the question I have is, how many of the 320 molecules are in your full spectrum product?
That's not what I meant. I didn't mean to dwell on the semantics of what
Okay.
full spectrum means. I meant what you consider to be good, whatever that vape product would be. Ingesting it instead of vaping it, how do you compare the delivery methods?
Oh, great question. The difference between ingesting versus vaping, right?
Yeah.
I have not seen one piece of science on the digestibility of terpenes.
You can't digest them, but you can bring them into the bloodstream.
Okay.
Your food is done.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Everything's dying.
You don't digest that THC either, you just bring it to the bloodstream.
Bring it to the bloodstream.
Then it metabolizes and terpenes do the same, but
Right. So here's the deal. Could I ask the question? What about like an indica versus a sativa edible? Is that a question we could talk about?
sure.
Is that what you, okay, because, this is my understanding, and I'm very willing to be wrong. When you make edibles, you use an ingredient to make them with, and the ingredient is hash oil. It's the easiest ingredient to work with. It could be powdered, but let's just say 9 out of 10 edibles, whether it's a chocolate bar, liquid, or a baked good, the ingredient you're using to infuse it with cannabis is THC oil. Where does the THC oil come from that becomes available as an ingredient. It's not being extracted from flowers. It's being extracted from sugar trim, which is the leaf matter, the leaves that grow out of the flowers. When the flower is in flower, it's producing trichomes on anything that grows in flower. It doesn't dedicate a lot of trichomes to its stem. It does a lot of cystolithic non-glandular trichomes. But the plant grows many versions of trichomes: capitate, stalked, sessile, bulbous, simple bulbous, complex bulbous. Trichomes on the leaves all over the flowers too. And bud tenders or trimmers will trim those leaves off. You sell the flower, and then you have trash bags worth of leaf matter covered in trichomes. They don't cure that leaf matter. They dry it out instantly. And it dries out instantly because just imagine vegetation being pulled apart from the fruit and being separate. Like if you rip grass off your lawn and put it on your sidewalk, it's going to dry out and cook by itself. So this leaf matter just dries out like that. So how much terpenes are available in the trim even before they extract it? That's part one. Part two is, how many terpenes are going to survive a CO2 extraction? It's a violent process, but a couple. But are there terpenes in there in the first place to be extracted? No. Is the extraction going to obliterate the terpenes more than it's going to retain them? It's going to obliterate them more than it's going to retain them. So then you have a product that has cannabis in it, but it has no terpenes in it. The difference between a stimulating effect and a sedative effect is what we call, in our industry, we have vocabulary words for that. The stimulating effect we call sativa, and the sedative effect we call indica. And that's where stoners got confused with speciation that went wrong in the 1970s, thanks to Small and Cronquist. Long story. The point is, I can't tell you how many products I've seen for sale that are edibles that are sold as either an indica or a sativa edible effect. And my understanding of the difference between a stimulating and sedative effect is terpene related. So I know that if I smoke terpenes that I smell higher in my nose, I'm probably going to get high. If I smell bud that's like rich, dark leathers, chocolates, tobaccos, low on the nose, the maxillary of the trigeminal nerve, I know I'm going to get stoned. If I eat an edible, I know that I'm ingesting the only chemical different drug that our industry provides. That's a broad, large statement, but what I mean by it is whether you stick it in your eye, rub it in your skin, under your tongue, you smoke it, you vape it, or shove it up your butt, it's going to be Delta 9. The second you digest it through the liver, it's 11-hydroxy. Delta 9 THC and 11-hydroxy THC are two very different molecules that are similar because they're in a really close arrangement. They're one little notch off from each other. But that little microscopic amount of chemical difference is the difference between an experience that is exponential in strength and in time, and it comes and it goes. THC, Delta 9 is pretty easy. It's a little bit like this. 11-hydroxy goes like this.
Can you do that again?
That's what 11-hydroxy is. Yeah, but okay, so you're talking about, to me, you're talking about two different drugs. When I want the effect of flour, that is not the same effect I want to receive when I know I'm going to eat an edible. I am very conscious of how different those drugs are. So when my body hurts and I'm tired and I know I'm going to have a hard time going to sleep and I'm done with my emails for the day, edible time. Are you going to eat an edible in the morning?
No.
Hell. But are you going to smoke a bowl in the morning?
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. That's two different drugs. That's different drugs. That is 2 different drugs. So I think like the difference between, you know, polypharmacy that you get from smoking is a whole subject matter and drug category completely different from ingesting something that has no polypharmacy. It's a single molecule that's THC that converts into 11-hydroxy, which becomes exponential and intense. And if you have a low tolerance to cannabis, oh boy. I don't agree with the industry standard. Our industry, again, to appease soccer moms, I know this because I was a part of the board. And where do they have these meetings? Children's Hospital. It's only to appease soccer moms. It's a big part of our industry. It's like smoke and mirrors. Shit, where was I going with that?
The industry standards.
Oh yeah, the industry standard of eating edibles is 10 milligrams, wait 2 hours. Our industry came up with that as a standard because we have to be making standards. Everything has to be put in a box. We're Americans. Okay. If my sister ate a 10 milligram cookie, you are talking about a human being who will be incapacitated for 7 hours. 10 milligrams is way too much for a level 0 tolerance. Way too much. And that's our industry standard. So you get someone from Oklahoma, actually we got a couple, they brought a raccoon with them, just to let you know. You think I'm kidding, I just smoked a joint with a raccoon 5 minutes before this time. Oh, they got the raccoon in the room. Okay, so we're talking about smoking weed with raccoons in the room. This is my life. You get someone from Oklahoma, these guys know what they're talking about, but most of their neighbors don't have a clue. So they drive across the border, they come to Colorado. You're in a state where you have to be trained, licensed, and certified to paint fingernails and cut hair. You have 15,000 bud tenders pretending to be pharmacists. You got a cute 20-year-old who doesn't know what a cannabinoid is. And she's in charge of selling you your medicine. And your kid who has epilepsy. But you're from Oklahoma, you don't know anything. You drive across the border, you want to buy a chocolate bar. But thank God this bud tender went to our industry bud tender trainings and learned that the industry standard is 10 milligrams. You should start with 10 milligrams. But in the state of Colorado, our lab testing has 15% variance. So you might be eating a 25 milligram cookie. Oh, do you know what that means? What does 25 milligrams of THC mean? I'll tell you what, I bet you everyone in this room knows the volume of a glass of beer compared to the volume of a spirit compared to the volume of wine. Can you see the little chart in your doctor's office now? The little shot glass, the cup of beer, the half-full red glass of wine with a stem. There's a standard for alcohol dosage between the different product types. Do you think your patient has in their mind what the milligram dose of THC is and what that looks like? No. Yeah.
I agree that the 10 milligram for a novice is way too high,
Yeah.
but the plus 15% of the 10 milligram does not come to 25.
So you're right. I'm sorry.
It comes to 11 and a half.
You're right. Yeah. 11. Thank you. I don't do the math. I smoke weed. Thank God there's somebody smart in the room.
bumper sticker.
Right? And that's why they hire me to be the guy to get your CME value for all these smart doctors and scientists. I don't know how they do it. But anyways, any more fun questions? Yes?
What's flushing?
That's a great question.
I have no idea what that means.
So, in the state of Colorado, we treat these plants terribly. Terribly. It's such, like, this is so bad. This is like, I'm just giving you my truth, okay? My truth is, these plants are kind of like, we grow plants the way that if you mess up in North Korea, there's a certain place you go. And there's a certain way you live. That's how I feel like we grow our plants. These are living, conscious beings. They do yoga. They communicate with each other. They understand who we are on a relationship basis, and you can measure that with sound. These plants are beyond conscious, and I can explain the consciousness of them in ways that will actually floor you. But just believe me when I say that these are really, really conscious plants. In our state, we don't let our girls breathe fresh air. They never see the sky. They're not allowed to touch soil. They have no fungal content that they build a relationship with, even though they're programmed to drink nutrients through a fungal relationship. But we don't give them any fungal relationships. A lot of people will put this thing called mycorrhizae into their water, but their water is full of chlorine and will just kill the mycorrhizae. Or whatever salt nutrients will just destroy the fungal content of the medium. So the medium is what the plants are growing in. And if they're not growing in the ground, you have to compose a medium for these plants to be growing in. So a cool industry term is soilless soil.
Yes.
So it's soil that's not soil. So it's peat moss, it's coconut shell fiber, it's hydrotone, it's perlite, it's something weird that's soft and fluffy. It's everything that's not soil, right? It's really challenging for soilless soils to maintain a fungal network. And it's really easy for whatever these mediums are to collect the salts that are residual that the plants don't drink that we feed them. So when you feed a cannabis plant daily, every other day, every 3 days, whatever your schedule is, you are putting nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, manganese, copper, iron, sulfur, silica in and around this root medium for maybe 4 to 6 months. Flushing means to flush out the residual salts, minerals, and nutrients that are trapped in the growing medium that are also still inside your plant. So if you smoke a flower that has not been flushed at all, and it came from a grow that uses neon-colored nutrients that are salt-based, you're gonna cough your brains out. It's gonna feel like hot spider webs in your chest, and your face is gonna go red. And it's gonna hurt because you're smoking on all of these salts, these nutrients that I just mentioned. If you flush properly with water and pressure, physically flush the medium and drain it and not add any more nutrients for the last 2 to 3 weeks of your grow cycle, you're flushing out all the salts from the plant's body and its grow medium. And when you smoke a flower that's been fully flushed, it's really clean. It doesn't hurt when you smoke it. It's clear. And then, if you're growing cannabis the right way, you're not adding any nutrients. You're not spraying it with anything. It's growing outside, photosynthesizing by the sun. Its roots are connected to a fungal network with no-till, and you are adding all inputs from your farm and your grow as its nutrient base that you create in its water. When you don't add any salt nutrients to it, and you just add plant-based nutrients that you make in a humti, a soup, water, just all of your grasses and weeds and stuff, and you just feed that to your plant, and you maintain a fungal network that communicates and delivers all the nutrients, and this happens outside, you were talking about dense, fluffy buds with sticky trichomes, radiant in cannabinoids and terpenes that don't need flushing whatsoever because there's nothing to flush in the first place. And when you smoke those flowers, you're like, oh my God, what have I been smoking on all this time? Is that you just learn that, McDonald's and Burger King aren't your only options. There's like a farmer's market with fresh produce down the street. There's a big difference, huge difference.
What's your harvest technique?
Well, but here's the problem. We got so many problems, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Tons of problems. One of our biggest problems is somebody had to have slept with somebody to get Excel the contract that mandated every single one of these grow operations must grow indoors. Do you know how much it hurts my heart being someone who is of the earth and works with the plants and animals and really cares for them, knowing how big and radiant our summer sun is, and knowing that every single cannabis plant in the state has a barcode on it, an RFID tag, is being videotaped 24 hours a day, and is sitting inside, and is using a 1,000 watt high pressure sodium bulb, which is $100 a bulb a month. Some of these warehouses literally have 2,000 bulbs in a warehouse. They are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on electricity, and we are pumping more coal in a bigger footprint, carbon footprint on this planet, because somebody got a sweet deal. And they're making so much money because we're not allowed to let these natural conscious beings exist in the way they should. That's a problem for me. And so even though some of these growers in here are like, dude, I agree with you. I wish we could grow no-till. I wish we could let our fungal network happen. But we're regulated by the state and forced to grow every one of these conscious beings under light bulbs trapped in warehouses.
Can I make a statement real quick with that?
Yeah.
I feel like it just, so people from outside the state, it kind of feels like you're saying that living soil can't be achieved indoors.
That's a good question if you were asking that. Can living soil be achieved indoors? Absolutely. Can we make an indoor living soil situation? Yes. Totally. It is beyond rare in our industry as a culture for our growers to even know what living soil is and means. And so when you have a culture like Northern California and Oregon, culturally, the neighbors communicate with each other who are growing plants outside, and you are getting regions and areas of the industry that are permitted to grow plants in the way these people want to be growing plants. So for me, it would be better if we didn't have to come up with a crazy creative solution, such as how can we reenact Mother Nature outside indoors because we have to. I'd rather say, why don't we go to the legislature and convince them to let us grow our plants outside when we have the season for it. And then for all the other year-round in Colorado we can't grow outside, obviously we'll be growing inside. But how cool would it be if in our state we could grow plants with living soil outside? I'm not saying it can't be done inside. I'm saying I'm personally frustrated that our regulations don't permit us to grow plants the way I think we should.
I agree.
So
I
it's
just
an opinion.
want doctors to know that there's a drastic difference between living soil and growing hydroponically.
Totally.
And spraying pesticides.
Of
And
course.
I think because we live here in Colorado, we live in a little bit of a bubble.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people that are going to start consuming cannabis as medicine. And I want them to know what really is being sprayed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've touched on in your talks myclobutanol, which is known as Eagle 20, which is a horrible, horrible fungicide. And for the most part, especially where I'm doing a lot more consulting now in Oklahoma, it's a free-for-all. When I worked in a commercial setting here in Colorado, no one checked what I sprayed. So it was up to my morals and my ethics. And I just want medical doctors to know that as well. It's not just about the terpenes and the cannabinoids and stuff like that. It's also how it's produced. And I would like to also see that more and hopefully in your interpreting classes where you talk about more of the way the cannabis is manufactured, not just the end
Absolutely, and if you were in my 6-hour level 1 course, we start with cannabis appellations and cannabis terroir and cannabis typicity, and how if you grow cannabis, like I said, the right way, that's an opinion of mine, growing it on living soil, I believe that's better than a synthetic version, is something we cover. And interpening is only about flower. We never talk about end product. If we were talking about concentrates, edibles, anything like that, cannabis product and sales training is a textbook that I wrote. Every sublingual, transdermal, topical, smoke, vapor, concentrate, hash, suppository, even personal lubricants. All organized for bud tenders, nurses, or doctors to know what medical cannabis products are available in the industry today. Is a course I have. It's available online. The full course or class by class. You got a patient that wants to know about edibles, they could literally just take my edible class for $20 and learn everything you could ever want to know about edibles for the rest of your life. That for the whole industry. That's this class. That's different from my responsible vendor class, which is state certified by CDPHE and MED. This one's required by law in Puerto Rico. You can't put on a badge and sell psychotropic medicines to people without having to have learned what they are first. Go figure. Puerto Rico figured it out, but Colorado, I tell the legislature this to their face for the 10 past years. We still can't turn the RV program from optional to mandated. Why? So dumb. This is just frustrating. But interpening is a class only on flower. We don't bring up extracts, concentrates. We don't bring up
I was getting more to like the
edibles.
salt content.
Yeah.
Because I admire your work. I hope I'm not coming across. I really admire your work, to be honest. I've bought some of your training material.
Thanks.
But I have noticed, and I'm been able, myself have been able to judge a few of the cannabis cups. And what I start to really notice is like PGRs and heavy salt content. And I would like to start to see maybe that, and maybe that's more with like talking to the heads of these organizations. But I would like to see that there's almost like points taken off. In my opinion, PGRs is cheating as a cultivator, right? So if I'm
Do you want to tell people, because most people don't.
plant growth regulators. So it's a way for me, if I'm feeding like a hydroponic system, to give it that oomph and that girth. Where when I grow with a living soil, when we're using microbes, the microbes are breaking down that organic matter into carbon, and that is feeding the entire soil food web. And that's really and that's why and we agree on that is, in my opinion, it's the only way to grow if we're going to talk about on a medicinal stage front.
Yeah, and the biggest truth that we can all agree on is, thanks to Uncle Sam, this conversation has not been allowed to be had for damn near 100 years. So we all have a lot of catching up to do. And because it's a circus out there, because it's worth billions of dollars and it's new and exciting, it's challenging to have proper conversations with the proper people in the proper settings. Having you, me, and everyone else here today, this is great, and it's rare. You don't see a lot of the business owners in here. You don't see a lot of the growers in here. These people are really satisfied making tens of millions of dollars doing what they're already doing because their entire consumer base doesn't know anything of what we're talking about. They can get away with all of this. The legislature doesn't have a clue. People just tell the legislature, oh, we're lab testing, and we're doing it for potency and for quality. And they're like, cool. Good that we're lab testing our product. That's it. You get my little squirrely button there. I might ruin the conversation and be like, we're not really lab testing for quality or potency, just like, hate to break it to you. But it's like, we're all just trying to figure this out in a circus. Everyone's just to the moon right now, trying to get theirs. I'm just trying to teach people stuff that's been reviewed, approved, state certified. I believe most cannabis education companies are just full of BS because I take their classes and they're just this unbelievable amount of cannabis misinformation recycled. How many people are cannabis educators in this industry who train and certify people on cannabis things or stuff that have never worked a day in their life in this industry? More of those than people like me who come from the industry and produce the curriculum ourselves. How many cannabis education companies mandate that all of their training programs have to be reviewed and approved? Damn near none of them. You should never take a piece of information about the product or the industry or the plant cannabis from someone without first making sure that there's someone who knows what they're talking about. I don't know everything of what I'm talking about. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I don't pretend to be. The amount of information I wish I knew about cannabis that I don't is vast. I can tell you all of that's true. If I was gonna take a class from someone, I would just ask that person in a basic way, just out of curiosity. How long have you worked in the industry? In which state? What was it that you were doing specifically? Because if you are a cannabis industry regulator and you're just all government, I might not want to take a bud tender class from you. Because you've never worked in the dispensary.
Exactly.
So, like, sometimes you rather take information from people who have the experience. And a lot of these smart doctors and scientists, they don't want to take information from people like me because I don't have a white lab coat or a PhD. But I hate to bring it to you, I've been doing nothing but cannabis my entire life. And I might know a thing or two about it. That could help. So it's about being open-minded. What's really cool about Colorado is its legislature is open-minded to having the cannabis industry always participate in co-creating our industry, which is why it works better here than in most places. So, like, I'm giving the thumbs up to Colorado. I'm not saying we're perfect. We have so many problems. There's so many things I wish we could change. Mandate responsible vending programs so that every single bud tender you hire is already trained and certified before you hire them. Done. You know how you do that? You turn the MED into a DMV, the way it's supposed to be.
Thank you.
So if the state of Colorado is gonna let you do this insane thing called drive a car, you can kill someone any day driving a car. So if the state is gonna give you a badge to hold on to allow you to do that job, driving a car, they make sure that you can see first, they make sure that you can hear first, and that you understand the rules of the road. Then, once you've passed that test, they then hand you their badge. In Colorado, you can just be cute and sign up. And that's it. How cool would it be if you wanted to be an industry member and be a bud tender? What if you invested $30 into your career and got some training and a certification, and then you walk to the MED with your responsible vendor training certification, and you're now ready to apply for a badge? Oh, you're trained, you understand all of our rules and our regulations, you know that edibles are chemically different than flower and how to communicate that to a customer. You're going to reduce problems in our industry. You're going to make this whole thing work out better for everyone. Great, let's fingerprint you and sign you up. Not one business owner has to pay for their employees' training. Easy. So simple. State won't do it. I've only got 1 minute, but I keep talking. You have to pull me off.
Along that topic, how many states require training?
Oh my God. Okay, so here's New York requires 4 hours for physicians. The guys who don't touch the product or sell it to anyone. The cannabis industry mandates that New York has physicians take 4 hours.
4 hours.
Illinois, by law, your bud tenders, your staff has to take 8 hours of cannabis education. Ask the state of Illinois what cannabis education means.
Exactly.
It's fucking nothing.
So the dispensary owners.
I guess that means you could toss High Times magazine to each of your bud tenders and have them read it for a few hours and you're covered. Washington, I believe they have like some required bud tender training, but because Washington knows how to do everything without the industry's help, they invented their own version of bud tender training that is god awful. That's what Alberta just did too. Alberta, Canada, they mandate training. It's 15 minutes long and it sucks. And I talked to the guy who made the training and I asked him, I said, are you aware that your training sucks? And he said, yes, we're good with that.
So,
Alaska is the worst of them all. In Alaska, by law, if you're going to be a bud tender, you have to take 2 hours of the state's mandated training. And guess what it is? You have to physically be sitting in a seat for 2 hours minimum, having someone read to you what the regulations in the state are. It's not, how do you assess a patient for their tolerance? It's not, what's the difference between wax and shatter? It's not, what does the term indica and sativa mean, and how do you relate that information to your patient? It is literally, you have to have a camera at every ingress and egress, which is 12 feet of the inside and exterior of every door. Next. It's 2 hours of someone reading the state's regulations to you, required by law. Doesn't teach you anything. That is the state of cannabis education today. Thank you very much. Sorry to be Debbie Downer. Let's go smoke one and feel better.
Everybody take this class.
Yeah, my level 1 interpreting class is going to be online soon. It's going to be like 6 hours. If you guys are interested in any of my tools, I'd love to sell you some. If you guys haven't seen the loop before, this one little card you can take anywhere and measure a cannabis bud, where you feel the smell in your face, pistil structure, bud structure, or leaf shape, to gauge exactly where on the spectrum of psychopharmacy it falls, the high qualities and acceptable qualities of your flower, the unacceptable visual and odor characteristics of your flower, the terpenes that you're smelling on your flower, and what should happen to you when you smoke them, all in one little theme. So I've got weed wheels, I've got hash wheels, I got courses, I got certifications, I got some weed, we can smoke some, we can learn some, and thank you very much.
Thank you.